Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. I'm Andrea Sherban. I'm the chair of the committee Work-Life Balance, and I'm very happy to moderate this webinar with a very important topic for our profession, reducing reactivity in relationships. So thank you so much, Beverly Hills Bar Association. And thank you for this privilege having a very special guest today. This webinar is co-sponsored by the Mediation section. Thank you, Glenn, so much. So we are ready to present and to welcome our expert that I have a special privilege to present you today, the expert that is gonna bring us more light in the relationships. So today, the expert for this webinar, our guest, our presenter is Sharon Loeschen. Sharon Loeschen is the president of Virginia Satir Global Network, and she is licensed in clinical social worker in private practice in Long Beach, California, and is author of the Satir Process, Systemic Training in the Skills of Satir, The Secrets of Satir, and Enriching Your Relationship with Yourself and Others. She's also co-author of Psychoeducational Enriching Program that is Satir-based. And I'm so privileged to introduce Sharon as my mentor. And Sharon, thank you so much for being open to be here today with us and to bring your light in the lawyers' world, because we need so much these tools. We need so much this wisdom in the relationship with ourselves and others. So thank you, Sharon. It's a privilege. Thank you so much. And welcome to this special webinar.
Thank you, Andrea, and to the association. It's my great privilege. I wanted to just begin by reminding us all that reactivity is human. And as Andrea was talking, I was reminded of, I used to work at Family Service of Long Beach, and I was assigned a couple, and they both had PhDs. And at first I got anxious, like, oh my goodness, these are really smart people. And then I realized my husband has a PhD and we're just ordinary people, and I sleep with him every night. So this is a human process, okay? And I appreciate that many of you, you know, may see people at the height of their pain around their reactivity. So I thought it might be helpful for us to look at it, but just to understand that it's there for all of us, and that it can lead to patterns. I was also thinking about my colleague who specializes in running workshops and working with couples. And so sometimes she takes her husband with her, and you know, they talk in front of the group and so forth. And he said to one of the groups, you know, there's nobody I'm more reactive to than my wife. So I think the closer you are, the harder it gets in terms of reactivity. So just understand that we're all in this together. The problem can be that we get into patterns. And I actually heard a neuropsychologist call them ruts, that we literally have these chemical pathways become so embedded in our brains that they become ruts, and it can be very hard for us to step out of them. In fact, it can become dangerous because they actually can escalate. That's what I've learned. I've been in practice for 40 years now, and I have really seen that escalation pattern. And so I would like to talk with you about the scripts that couples get, because the sad thing is the research shows that couples don't come into counseling until 6 years after they know they're in trouble. And that means that there's 6 years of this embedded cycle pattern that goes on. And they can tell you every step of that script. It literally becomes a script, but it's like a black hole that they can't step out of by themselves. And the black hole is going to be that they're either going to be fighting more and more, or they're going to be distancing more and more, usually. So what can we do to help with that? Well, we can reduce the reactivity by developing our awareness. And awareness is a resource that we as human beings have that's unique to being human, and that we can actually increase the power of our capacity to notice what's going on within us and between us. And it is only when we have that kind of awareness that we have choice. Otherwise, we are being run by our embedded ruts, pathways, reactions. Is there anything you would like to say at this point, Andrea? Because I would love for it to be a dialogue.
Okay. Yes, it was very interesting because you were mentioning about couples and about the fact that this reactivity it's activated with the close person. I mean, with the loved one, with your familiar, the people around you. And I was wondering what happens in the workplace where you are not so close and you want to keep your image, you want to be strong. And I heard many times in my coaching session, lawyers that they have these problems bringing the work problems at home and being so reactive home because of the problems in the workplace. And I would like if you can give us some to explain us what happens in that moment when we are at the workplace and we want to be reactive in that moment. What happens in our inner world? What happens there? How come they are stuck somewhere, and how come they are not disappearing? Because with the time goes and we keep like we storage in ourselves, and when we get home and we have this familiar, we are suddenly reactive.
Okay. Well, the process is the same. We're more reactive, and we'll talk about why later on, to what goes on inside of why we're more reactive at home. But the process is the same in terms of becoming aware of what is activating us or triggering us with a coworker. There is a concept called perpetual differences that I find very helpful. For example, I was just talking to someone about the perpetual difference around neatness and messiness. Okay. And if you have a coworker that's very messy and you lean to be very ordered, and that can drive you nuts over the daytime. Or if you have somebody who's very casual and you're very organized, that you can bump up against each other. The question is becoming aware of what it is that aggravates you and what choices you have about dealing with that and letting it go. If it's a perpetual difference, the odds are you really need to let it go, whether it's neatness or a difference in perpetual differences. There's oftentimes a difference in the amount of socialization that people want. And that can be with somebody at home, but it can also be in your work site. If you have a work partner who really, likes to talk things through, and you like to be quiet and think things through, that perpetual difference can bump up against each other. And again, it's awareness of, okay, I'm being activated here. Now, how can I pause, and what are my choices for responding to that?
Mm. So in that moment, for example, if one of our choice could be to think that we are all different, so we have different background, different expectation, different emotional uh, problems. So we have thinking that each person around us is different, and yeah, they are just different. Already something, it's already helping us to calm down and to be more empathic and to be more connected with others and thinking through this diversity to connect us somehow, then I imagine it's everything start to become calmer.
Right. When you say start thinking, okay, they're different, they cope, they live a different style than I do. The minute you do that, you are activating the brain. The brain is reacting at the primal level. But when you begin to think, okay, they are different, they focus on time different than I do, or whatever it is, you are up in your prefrontal cortex, and then you've got more choices because you're thinking more broadly. You're not being reactive.
Yes, this is important. Then
And
it takes a little bit time, but in that moment, I know that breathing is very important to breathe, right?
Through the breath, you recenter. You begin to get back up in your prefrontal cortex, and you recenter. I was also reminded of something when you talked about maybe you kind of stuff it at work. You're aggravated with somebody who's doing something different than you would, but then you get reactive when you get home. One of the things that I often suggest to clients is that if they've had a really stressful day at work, they do what I call front door therapy. And that is, before they actually open that door to walk in, they take a deep breath and just imagine all that aggravation from the day going out, so that they can enter and connect fully with the family or whoever lives there with them.
Yeah, I love this metaphor, and also I like to use this metaphor, unplug.
Yeah.
It's not electricity of
Yeah.
reactivity.
Yep.
There is not energy to react anymore.
Right.
So it's a matter of training and to put in our mind.
And with the pandemic and people working at home, this is even more difficult, because it's not like you have a ride home, a commute where you can make some kind of a transition and de-escalation. You may go from your computer right over to be with somebody else, and you're still carrying all that energy. So I guess my metaphor of front door therapy came before the pandemic. So unplugging, I like that.
Yes, it's very, and also awareness, what you said, awareness of reactivity, awareness, being aware that something is wrong there. Because usually when we are reactive, the people around us, they are becoming also, this circle, defending and reactive and defending. So we have to be aware about this circle that is never end. If we are not being aware, starting doing some actions, I mean the choices, as you propose, to have these choices, to be aware which choice I have. I have this metaphor, I have the breath, I have, we're gonna find, each of us is different, and we're gonna find different methods, I suppose. And from there, as you said, we have choices. That is very important.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide and talk more about reactivity. And our natural state is to protect ourselves, and it comes from evolution. We now know there's very sophisticated understanding of our what's called polyvagal nervous system. Okay, that there are 3 primitive forms of fight when we perceive we're being threatened: fight, flight, or freeze. And fight and flight are both in the polyvagal nervous system, which have to do with mobilization. I perceive this as a dangerous place, I'm going to fight, or I perceive it's dangerous and I'm going to flight. Now, freeze is a very different one. They've discovered it's a different nervous system branch within the vagal system. And that is where you shut down and you just can't respond. And this is one that's in the past been a favorite for me. And these are, when I say favorite, it's not like you ever choose this. This is just what your body does. But I became aware of it when a good friend of mine that I trusted and loved would say to me, "Hello, Sharon, where did you go? Where did you go?" And then I began to realize how much that I just instantly, when I felt some kind of emotional threat, would go into freeze. And I want to show you, am I blocking the screen? Can you see my face, or is it just, you can just see the wording?
Yes, we can see the face too.
Okay, I don't want that to block that okay?
Yes.
All right, okay. So this,
Sorry, by the way, the people, all the attendee, they have a presentation in the email. We sent it, and also in the chat is the whole presentation. You
okay,
can find it.
all
Yes.
right. So the first defense I want to talk about is fight. And fight can be in the form of blaming. You know, I think it's the cancer of our world right now, is to figure out, somebody has to be to blame and to fault. And like, you know, you should have known that we were out of milk. Somebody gets up in the morning, they're in a rush, they go to the refrigerator and there's no milk. Okay. Then the generalizing, and when I talked about escalating, this is how escalating can happen. You go from, you should have known that we were out of milk. Then you start generalizing, you always forget. And then you start labeling, you are such a lazy person. You know, you could have easily picked up this milk on your way home last night. Now it could even actually go into physical attacking. And my experience is that these are like boundaries, and that couples who stay here, it's going to be painful, but it's not going to escalate. But if they go to this, pretty soon they start fighting here and they're right here. Pretty soon, if they break that boundary, they go from, I'm upset with you over the milk, to I'm labeling you. And then the most dangerous is when it goes straight from I'm upset about the milk to some kind of a physical attacking each other. Okay, so the other form of the mobilization of the polyvagal nervous system is the flight. And flight can come in the form of placating. We're still using the reason I'm saying that about the milk is quite twice I have known couples who got into terrible places of fighting around the issue of not having milk in the morning. Okay, so placating can be, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm such a loser, I always screw it up. Okay, that's pulling in. That's like the little dog who's submitting, rolling over on his stomach because they, okay, you're dominating, you're terrifying me here. Or distancing, distracting by saying, oh, you know what, your boss called, you need to go pick up the phone. Or super reasonable, which is where, you know, a lot of us go who have a lot of information and a lot of facts in our heads, and say, well, very calmly and very coldly, you know, we do need a better system of how we organize buying the groceries. Okay. Then we could withdraw emotionally. And emotionally, it's like, I don't see what the big deal is here. When the other person's upset, they know they're going to be late for work, they're not going to get the food they need. And then withdrawing physically, which is, I'm out of here, and you leave. Okay. And then finally, freeze, which can be numbing out to cope. It can be shutting down when you feel really, really threatened. And what we now know is with this particular immobilization nervous system, if you grow up in a family where you feel threatened a lot, either emotionally or physically, and you're continually having to, that part's being activated, that can lead to depression. Do you have anything you want to add to this, Andrea?
Yes, I was thinking about these three phases and how much it's based on the personality of the people, on the environment they were grew up, and the systemic family. And I can notice some people. I remember when I practiced and I had the lawyers working for me, like 15 lawyers, and I was like a bossy. And I asked about something, it was going there, and I remember now a lawyer, and she was like freezing, and I asked a question and she couldn't answer. I mean, she couldn't say something, and I didn't, on that time I couldn't understand why you are not speaking. Tell me, give me an answer. It's so important to know what happens. As much I was curious, as much she was so freezing. For I was so amazed in that time, and of course I became more reactive because I didn't know all about this, and I didn't know that we react in a different way. So I think are so precious this information to be aware when you are in the conflict with somebody, and you see the reaction and you start to observe the person and to understand here what is about here. It's a flight, because some people also in the flight, I notice you when I speak with somebody and you feel it's not there. I mean, you speak, they are talking, they are saying words, but energetically you feel it's not there. It's somewhere, and it's the sensation is so weird to have a conversation. It's so weird, and it's for me it's very very weird, and I don't like this sensation at all. And then to fight again, this is okay. This is my argument. This is my argument. It's like a boxing, and I'm pretty sure all the attendants, they have this situation, they have these people around, and you have all these people around and every day. But now when you share with us these resources, it's about awareness, as you said. If we have in our mind this awareness about each situation, we start not being that much reactive, because we understand there are emotions, they are managing in this way. So as much we calm ourselves, as much we help another person to calm. So I think this is so important to be aware about this kind of reactivity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next slide. This is such an important piece because this is why it's so hard in a relationship. Like energy pulls like energy. So if I'm upset at my husband because he's late, which by the way, he never is, that's not his issue, but let's say he is. And I say, where were you? Okay, and a blaming tone, and so much has to do with tone. I pulled to that defensive energy in him, okay? And in the second part of the slide, I wrote blaming can pull to blaming back. So you see that a lot, right? But it also, if the person's instincts are to placate because that they go to, oh, I'm scared, I'm gonna get in trouble here, then that may be their defense. And then they may go into distracting and then to being super reasonable or being withdrawing. And it becomes an ongoing dance, okay? And one of the big challenges is to recognize not only what your first default is, but then to see if you can begin to figure out, you know, what's the next place I go to and the next place I go to, okay? And then finally, as to where that goes in terms of the ongoing dance, the ongoing cycle, and beginning to, the minute you start getting awareness of, oops, we're back in that dance. And the dance is the problem, not us. This is a really important concept that to help people get out of the fact that I'm failing, I'm being bad. No, we got caught up in a cycle. The cycle's the problem. And if either one of us can step back in our tone, pause, and choose not to come from that tone or into those generalizing, labeling places, most of the time, the good news is also that like energy pulls like energy. So things will start to tone down because the other person senses there's been a shift. There's been a shift. Anything you want to say about that, Andrea?
Yes, it's amazing how I was thinking about the non-verbal, because the voice is so important, the tone is so important. So when we want to communicate something and to prepare another person, that is something new. For example, as a lawyer, when we have the relationship with a client, and do we want to communicate something that is not very good for the clients, or a bad news, something that uh, they are not going to be very happy about that. It's so important, the voice we have, and to prepare this relationship, and to manage the fear the clients they're gonna have. Oh, what is gonna happen? I'm bad, or something is. Because when you are speaking about this topic, I imagine that in our brain, when we have these emotional reactions, there are coming voices of fears in our mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we have to manage also these voices, and we are not very present in the moment, and we can't find any solution, any escape,
Mm-hmm.
because we are escaping our voices in our mind and in our inner talk.
Right.
So this dance is so important to find the right rhythm. And I think it's, and you can tell us if it's that important to find this rhythm within self, and from there to start
Yes.
being.
You know, it's just amazing to me when somebody in therapy makes a shift, and then lo and behold, the person they were upset with makes a shift too. You know, again, it's that like energy pulls like energy. And I was also thinking about when you mentioned the power of voice tone, and our teacher, Virginia Satir, said if you think about an infant, you know, they don't have that cognitive ability developed. The way they experience people is by tone, voice tone, and touch. Okay. And when we are reactive, again, we are mostly listening for tone. There's a very famous trauma specialist from Harvard named Bessel van der Kolk, and he was lecturing to us on trauma, and he's talking about how important voice tone is. And he said, you know, when I travel a lot to lecture, and he said, then I call my wife, and he said, I know within a nanosecond by her tone whether we're connected or not. And everybody in the 500 of us in the room, we all laughed because yes, it's you're just listening for a particular tone that's very, very programmed in all of us. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, which is how do we go about strengthening our capacity to pause and respond rather than to react? And as I said, awareness is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. It's pretty miraculous. Um,
So awareness, when you said awareness, is in other words, to pay attention.
yes,
Yes,
to
to
slow
pay
down.
attention.
What? Okay, they just said that, and we're going to go into this a little bit more in terms of what you do in your brain. But what am I feeling? How am I interpreting this? And how do I choose to respond? Okay. So let's look at this next slide of becoming aware of what is driving your behavior. So when you're aware, the first level is what we talked about. Am I fleeing in some way, in some form? Am I fighting in some form? Or am I frozen? That's the behavior, okay? And that's what's visible. We can watch that in ourselves. We can be aware of it. We can become aware of it in another person as well. But if you think about what drives behavior, this can be really helpful for helping you to respond rather than react. And that is to understand that within each of us, there are both the visible behaviors and coping stances of blaming, placating, being super reasonable, and so forth. but those are driven by levels underneath. And the first level are the reactive feelings. Whatever those feelings are, that's why it's so close to the waterline. You may not even know until you begin to develop your awareness muscle. All you know is you're pissed and you start blaming somebody. But when you begin to be aware, you can begin to sort that out. Oops, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? And then you know that that first feeling, unless it's some kind of a biological thing that's going on with you, almost all the time, that feeling is coming out of your perception of the situation. So let's say that I'm going to walk you through this, that the behavior that you're seeing in yourself is that you work 24/7, okay? And your partner is getting really upset about this. And the way you cope with their upset toward you is that you go into a coping stance of withdrawal. So if you've thought about what would be the feelings underneath withdrawal, it would usually be some form of fear. And then the perception, what meaning would you be giving to this other part, your partner being so upset with you? And it might be that the meaning you give is that they want more than I'm capable of giving. And now what we know is that that interpretation is based upon your own database. And everybody in the world has their own database of logged in expectations and beliefs. Conclusions, usually the ones that are most powerful, are the ones you made when you were small and you didn't have a developed brain, but you're trying to make sense out of the world. And underneath that are the unmet yearnings that you experience in terms of wanting to feel safe, seen, heard, loved, understood, appreciated, important, significant, cared for, so many of those common human yearnings. Anything you want to say about this at this point, Andrea?
Yes, I have two questions. One regarding those interpretation. And by the way, guys, if you want to have, we're going to have in the end of the seminar, the Q&A. So please put in the chat your questions so we can ask Sharon in the end of the webinar. We're going to have a short Q&A. So regarding these perceptions about feelings, you feel something and after you start having this interpretation, perception, it's anyway, any strategy, coping strategy to get rid of this interpretation, because those interpretation are labeling and are escalated to a different kind of feelings. Because when we start asking and putting labels and giving meaning, we go to another different kind of feelings. So it's those feelings are escalated. So from there, I want to get rid of this feeling. By this interpretation, I go and I find a different feeling. And this is one question. And related to this, I met people when they give interpretation, not in a bad way, like judging, in a good way, but it's kind of avoiding interpretation, like they don't want to face. So either one, either other, it's something is wrong there, because you go in a different feeling, either what we were talking about before, freeze and flight, fright. So what happens there with those interpretation?
Okay, I think I would like to go on with the slides because it'll come from those. Okay. Question. Good question.
Good. Okay.
Okay, so understanding what drives reactivity. Reactive feelings are driven by our perceptions, as we've said. And guess what? Our perceptions are not reality. And that's the hardest thing for all of us to understand, because we only see through our own eyes. We've only got, I was so struck when I first started training with Virginia Satir. I watched her work with a family, a single mother and two children, for 3 mornings. And then on the 4th morning, which was the end of the workshop, she called her up and she said, I'd just like to ask you, how you're doing this morning. And the woman said, well, Virginia, a very interesting thing has happened to me this morning. I had this dream. And Virginia said, what was your dream? And she said, in the dream, I was in an optometrist's office and I was looking for a new pair of glasses. And in my mind, that was such a beautiful description of what happens when there's some kind of a shift and transformation, and the person sees the world in a different way. So it can be that you yourself begin to see in a different way, or that you can begin to understand where somebody else is coming from and their perception. It's probably the most important thing out of all of this. When you ask Andrea about what do we do about perceptions, is if the minute you feel that intense rage or fear, whatever it is, you go, uh-oh, what's my perception? What am I doing right now? Unless somebody's hitting you, almost all the time, it is a perception that's triggered something in you.
So if we think that the fact that it's just the perceptions, like to give a shape and something, and to think it's just a perception, we are not attached to that, and we are not connected emotionally. Is that helping in that moment to realize that we are detached of this?
It's the first way of breaking that whole assumption that you are perceiving the world just as it is. If somebody frowns at me, and I immediately, because I come out of a history of if people are frowning at me, they're not happy with me, and my life is going to be, unhappy, then I can go straight to, uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Why are they unhappy with me? Well, that may be completely wrong. They may be frowning because they can't see well, they've got a headache, they're thinking about something else that upset them. It can be just immediate. Okay, so the minute you can say, oh, I need to check this out, then you have broken the trance, so to speak.
So it's good to pause ourselves and to take time to verify.
Absolutely. Check it out. Check out the meaning.
Good.
So how do we get these perceptions? They, as I say, they're based on our own database of our individual history and experiences and the conclusions we made about those experiences. So I'm a little kid, and I can't run as fast as my best friend, and so I conclude that somehow I'm slower, maybe I'm not as good. Whatever that little brain does, if that gets embedded in me, I can take that perception, those glasses, and everything that comes at me can come through that. The boss calls me and says, I need to see you. And I go, oh God, what did I do? And I've screwed something up. I get in there and the boss says, hey, I got a new project for you that I think you'd do really well at. And I go, oh, okay. And this is an example. This is a true example for me. Okay. Because my father was the principal and I was always scared I was going to get called into his office and get in trouble. It's just amazing how our own history impacts our perceptions. So let's look at some of the beliefs that are the most common that I see in terms of what drive perceptions in a way that's not helpful. And the first one is, I am not good enough. And it is almost universal. And I don't know exactly, other than that as little people, somebody is always able to do things better than we are. And so I don't know if that's how the little brain comes to this, but it's as I say, it's so common in the people that I work with. The second one I wrote down is I am unworthy. And this can come for lots of different reasons, but if there has been abuse, either neglect or abandonment or sexual or physical abuse, this one seems to be very, very embedded, because children always will sacrifice themselves for their parents. So they say, there must be something bad about me that my daddy had to do what he did to me. Okay. The next one, I am not smart enough. Again, it's that being little. And if you come from a very competitive environment, that can really, really be difficult for you. I don't belong. very common one. I am less than. And this one, after George Floyd's murder, has become much, much more clear to me, is the damage that white supremacy has done to Black people and people of color. Is that even in our laws, you know, at a time, it was declared that if you were Black, you were less than, you were subhuman, and that is a really serious issue in our world. The next one is we're switching into beliefs about others. People can't be trusted. And what happens, the sad thing is, if you wear those glasses, if that's how you perceive the world, then you're always looking for it. And in fact, you're not only always looking for it, sometimes you are absolutely unconsciously drawn to create it, to prove to yourself that that original belief, it's called inner consistency, that you want to keep it consistent, tragically. Or people will let me down, or people will hurt me. Anything you'd like to add, Andrea?
Yes, I was thinking that these beliefs are so linked to our reactivity. I mean, there is a link between the beliefs and in the way we react with each other. It's so important to identify those beliefs, and I'm sure each of us will have, and we already identify ourselves in those beliefs. Because, for example, I'm not good enough. It comes in my mind, myself being coming from the being perfectionist, like always wanted to prove that I'm providing more and more and giving more than it was. I deliver more than it's enough, because I feel I'm not good enough and I have to deliver more and more, and to become perfectionist in everything in the work. And I met so many clients in the coaching session, also providing and working so much time and just work, because they are not feeling they succeed in what they are doing. So this is so important, to be aware of the beliefs we have in our mind and how we link these beliefs with loving ourselves and being good enough. And this is an example: I'm good enough, I'm worthy, I'm smart enough. And to have this affirmation coming, like, healing and being, compassion with yourself, and finding that you are good enough and you love yourself enough and you are smart enough. And I think this is so important, to have the solution and the answer of all these beliefs, to shift and to see the different side of the coin.
You know, the tragedy is, what does the word enough mean? I mean, it's just an impossible.
Yeah.
What's enough mean? But when you talk about perfectionism, I really appreciate that, because that's oftentimes what happens, is another part becomes extreme, trying to counterbalance that unconsciously. I recently, last week, watched a documentary on the life of Maya Angelou. It was so powerful. And she said the transformative moment in her life is when someone said to her, Maya, you are good enough. But, oh, wow. Okay, so in
So
addition,
it's good to have a solution. So we can help. And I think what you said here, thank you, I appreciate this, that people in the relationship, we have to learn to validate each other. And when we see where somebody it's really good and it's smart, to say that, and to share between us in the relationship, to put this more validation instead of judgment.
thank you. You know, there's a famous researcher in relationships out of the University of Washington named John Gottman. And he came up with a conclusion about what he calls a good enough marriage. And he said it's what he calls the 5-to-1 ratio. That 5 times to 1, you either give a positive verbal or nonverbal communication to your partner. Okay. And when you're talking about validating and appreciating, I think that, the longer you're with somebody, the less you may just take things for granted. And it takes very little effort, but again, awareness and conscious choice I'm going to appreciate, somebody for getting up and getting me a cup of coffee, or whatever it is, makes such a difference.
Yes, the gratitude is the attitude.
Okay, so what else drives the perceptions, reactivity, are our expectations. And some people call those the SOSs, the shoulds, the ought tos, and the supposed tos. You should take care of the finances since I do the cooking, or you should take care of the cooking since I pay the bills. I mean, you can do this. I've heard this fight go both ways, right? Blame against blame. Or you should help out around the house, or you should know what I want. Anytime you hear yourself saying to someone else, you should, or you hear yourself saying to yourself, you should, you know that that is some kind of interpretation that's coming out of some old belief system, you know. And when you're working with people, either in the workplace or at home, it's really important to figure out what are your shoulds, and beginning to go, okay, that's just my rule. I was just talking with someone who has just gotten married, and she's been single a long time, and she's discovered that her new husband is not does not have the same desire to have things cleaned like she does. Okay. And so she has really worked to let go and realize that, you know, this is not life and death, and that she's going to choose harmony in the relationship over fussing at him every time he doesn't clean up after he makes dinner or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So can I let's see here a little example. If somebody comes and to say to a lawyer, you should have done this earlier, or you should have done this on time, or 1 hour before, or how how should be the response in this situation? Because there comes prison, flight or fight, or you know, how is the healthy response not to be reactive?
Well, it's all about congruence, which means being conscious of, first of all, okay, I just got reactive here. I want to go run, or I want to fight back and say, well, you should have done blah, 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 you know. So you take that moment to pause, and then you shift your tone, and you say something like, you know, I'm hearing that you thought I was going to do this at, you know, 1 o'clock, and I thought I had till 3 o'clock today. I'll work on it and do it as fast as I can. Whatever it is, it's all in that tone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Instead of going into blaming, placating, getting super reasonable, withdrawing, all those normal things, just consciously choosing, I'm not going to go there. How can I get more centered in my tone and the way I respond?
Mm-hmm. So the being congruent, it's so important to be authentic and
Yes.
to realize the reality, the situation. Either you were wrong or right, or you had another things to do and something happens in the program. You have to be congruent and to answer from that place of being yourself, but not from the place of fear or fighting or flighting.
Right.
Different.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Again, our teacher, Virginia Satir, would say that there are always 3 aspects in a relationship: yourself, the other, and the context. So if this is the work context, you know, and then you think about, okay, this is where I am. I'm not going to dismiss myself here and say, I'm so sorry, you know, I'll get this done as fast as I can. If it's pressuring you, I hear that you need this, I'm going to work on it right now. So you're honoring the other person's need. You're also honoring your own need not to go crazy or have an anxiety attack. And you're also honoring that this is a civil place in the workplace, and you got to keep it that way, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, good. And nobody ever gets this perfectly, right?
Exactly. We are human beings beyond any reactive.
Okay, so I wanted to show you some examples of using our awareness to think about, okay, what's going on inside of me? And let's say that the behavior above the iceberg is that I'm overeating. And the coping stance that I'm using is that I'm continually placating. my partner. And then I look underneath and think, what am I really feeling? And I realize that I'm very resentful. And the reason I put that in is because that's my experience, is that people who placating is their default defense can look very nice, but underneath they carry huge resentment because they don't feel okay to be who they are and ask for what they want. And they also have a fear of making the partner angry. They're so afraid that they'll be abandoned and not loved that they squelch themselves. When we're talking about self other than context, they take themselves out of the equation. Okay. So
and they try to please others or something like this.
Yes, I must please the other. So the perception is, oh God, my partner's unhappy. And I should put in there maybe, and that means, I'm going to lose, I'm going to be in trouble somewhere. And the expectation driving that perception is, I must always put other people's needs before my own, or they will abandon me. And the yearning underneath all of that is to be seen and heard. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So can you explain a little bit more about expectation and beliefs? I must always put others' needs before mine or they will abandon me.
This is one that's been made. The child and the adult made this decision a long time ago that this was the way to survive. Okay. And particularly if you have a situation where, let's say, that the mother is somewhat narcissistic and wants her children to be meeting her needs. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the child children always figure out how to survive. But the child decides, okay, that's how I'm going to survive. I'm going to meet my mother's needs. And that way she'll not abandon me emotionally or physically. Yeah.
So this is about other people's expectation, not about our expectation.
It's our expectation. I must always put others' needs before. So I'm expecting that of myself.
Oh, okay. So this is about the relationship with ourselves.
Yes, it is ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the most common ones that I see in therapy because resentment is toxic to the body. And over time, it will, cause problems. I don't know if it's really true, but I read once a study about people who are in codependent relationships with somebody who is addicted, and that people who are in codependent behavior toward another often die before the addict does, because they have taken themselves out of the equation so much and totally oriented toward believing unconsciously that they have to do everything to please this other person, or they themselves will die.
This happens also at the workplace when you want to please others.
Uh-huh. Now, that's a very interesting thing you brought up, Andrea, because I believe congruence is about consciousness, conscious choice. So, if I am in a workplace and I make the conscious choice to placate my superior because I don't want to lose my job, that isn't necessarily, going to cause the same kind of inside resentment and fear at the same level as if I believe that that's the way I have to live my whole life. If I believe I must please everybody and never speak what my voice is or ask for what I need or want, then that's when it can get into trouble. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly, I know very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one, let's see here. Using that concept of an iceberg, if the behavior that's above the line is the person is addicted to some substance or behavior, the coping stance oftentimes is blaming, that they seem to go together, blaming everybody else except taking responsibility for their own recovery. The feelings underneath that are driving that are numbness and, most importantly, shame. Okay. And that's what's hard to understand, because it's hard to understand that somebody who's blaming is covering shame, but that's what's really going on. And that shame is so painful that they have to keep convincing themselves that it's somebody else's problem.
And for this reason, many people, they are not speaking their voice because they feel shame.
Exactly. And a perception this person may justify in their minds, you know, the addiction and all the blaming because my partner doesn't satisfy me. And the expectation, the belief underneath that, that's probably unconscious, is it's not safe to be intimate and close. And the yearning, the deep heart yearning, is to be valued and loved. Not easy to see when somebody is heavily into blaming and addiction, but that's what's underneath.
This is amazing. Thank you. So let's take the last one and to give to ourselves before expecting from others.
Okay. So the last one in the iceberg is yearnings. And this can be really helpful to understand that at the heart of each of us, and the deepest part, are our yearnings, because they are the softest. If you think about an iceberg, when you get down at the bottom, it's not actually hard. It gets softer and softer as the water gets warmer. And the same is true for the feelings and the yearnings are at that level of the heart. So if you can step back and think to yourself, what am I really yearning for? And what's the other person, whether it's a co-worker or someone, what are they yearning for? Is it respect? Is it to be seen? Is it to be heard? Is it to be valued? What's going on? To be appreciated? That's a big one. To be appreciated. Okay. So I saw this graph or this graphic, and I went, oh, that's beautiful, because somebody had just said to me last week, thinking about, you know, people as icebergs, you know, just in terms of the metaphor, to understand that we have this underlying part that bumps up against each other big time, that we don't even know is there. All we see is what's the behavior and the coping stances. And then I had this picture of a family sitting around, and they're actually all icebergs. You know, it just kind of tickled me to think, okay, we're just seeing the tips, you know, and taking some of the heaviness out of it. Any thoughts about that, Andrea?
Yes, of course. And when I see this top of iceberg, I say those images, people, they try so hard to keep beautiful, you know, the image we try to keep it perfect. It's the top of the iceberg, but underneath there, it's so much stuff that that is what is the most important things to take a look, and from there to start shining the light, not the image, such an effort and cost, and yeah.
Okay, so one of the most important things about this whole process is that I invite you to consciously step out of being right, or, you know, and saying I'm right and getting rigid about it. And it's hard to do. We're all competitive by nature. And so just choosing to go, okay, what's more important to me is this work relationship or this friendship or this intimate relationship, where the relationship is more important. Rarely does it have to do with right and wrong. It's got to do with perceptions. If I could step back, hear their perception, hear mine, let's share mine, see if we can come to some new place. And last piece was in terms of having choices. I just gave an example. I said, if you're angry that your partner spends all of his or her time playing video games, you have choices. You can blame, you're addicted to those games. Or you can withdraw and get cold when the partner finally emerges. Or you can express your yearning. Again, the tone is everything. In a non-blaming tone, I miss you. Can we spend some time together? Okay.
So it's important to eliminate a little bit the ego and to go.
Exactly. Yes.
You have to get rid of the ego in order to to gain the attention and the love from the. So what you choose, the ego or you choose love? So
yeah. Oh, that's great. So I don't know. It says we're at 1:30, and I don't know if we have time for any of the questions or we just need to say.
yes, I have two questions. So one question is, first is, can you please define and give an example of being super reasonable?
Oh, sure. Let's see. Okay, an example of a client situation where the boyfriend says to the girlfriend, "Have you ever been depressed?" And the girlfriend goes, "What? What are you saying? What's your definition of depression? This is my definition of depression." No, 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 that's not kind of depression. No. Well, what are you meaning by that? Well, I meant that sometimes when people show that they're awfully tired and just go back and forth, all at that level of intellectual discussion of depression, which is what was really going on, was that she felt diagnosed and very hurt. Okay?
Very nice. Yes, thank you. It's beautiful. I hope the attendance is receiving the answer. And the second question is, who was the trauma teacher? You mentioned about the book before, not a trauma teacher. I think
Oh yeah,
Lender. How is?
The book that's really good is The Body Keeps Score.
Mm-hmm.
And the last name is, his name is Bessel, Bessel, Van, VAN, DER, Kolk, COLK. He's originally from the Netherlands. Bessel van der Kolk. But that book, The Body Keeps Score, is really good.
Everything. If we are not cooperating, body and mind is hard. Mm-hmm. Yes. So yes, we don't have questions anymore. So I don't know how to thank you, and for your explanation, for your comments, for your brilliant presentation, and it was such a good resource for lawyers' practice and for our daily life. Thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you for attendance, for being here, and to stay tuned to our inner world and to keep our work-life balance, because together we can create a beautiful world together. So Sharon, thank you so much. I really appreciate your comment, your presentation. It was such a beautiful time and energy you spent with us, like always.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Beverly Hills Bar. Thank you, everybody. So please, you are all welcome, all of you, to join the Work-Life Balance Committee and to come with ideas, what kind of programs you want to bring, and together we're going to create more work-life balance. Thank you so much.